All right, hey, welcome to Adventures Among Ideas. So, more about behaviorism today, everyone's favorite topic. Oh, I know. Well, I'm hoping to get back into some cultural and literary issues soon, but I am desperately trying to finish an article that I'm working on, or finish revising an article I'm working on about behaviorism, so it's a lot on my mind recently, so I'm going to talk about it again. But I want to say something today about the varieties of behaviorism and what all the different behaviorisms have in common. I think the average person, when they think about behaviorism, thinks of it in kind of a caricatured way as a guy in a white coat who goes around telling you that you don't have a mind, something like that. And uh, as is usually the case, things are a bit more complex than that. And just as we speak of many romanticisms, I think I've talked about this in other videos, other episodes. When you look at when you're looking at the 19th century, we talk about, or at least some people like to talk about many romanticisms, the different romanticisms. So, just like that, we can speak of many behaviorisms when we're looking at the 20th century and maybe even into the late 19th century, but mostly 20th century. So, in a sense, there have been as many behaviorisms as behaviorists, since each behaviorist, at least each major behaviorist, has their own distinctive version of behaviorism. So there's Watsonian behaviorism. You've got your radical behaviorism connected with B.F. Skinner. You've got Cantor's interbehaviorism. You've got Tolman's purposive behaviorism, and so on and so on. Uh, but is there some common core that ties all these different behaviorisms together? Is there some overlapping similarity, something that uh, relates them all, connects them all in some way, some common idea? Well, sort of. So when Morse Peckham, one way to think about it is that, so when Morse Peckham, who I've talked about a bunch, when he tried to understand the unity, or if there was a unity behind the diversity of romanticisms, he looked at the historical situation that people were responding to in the late 18th and early 19th century. And I think we need to do the same thing with behaviorism. So you can't, it's maybe difficult and sometimes impossible to say what one of these isms actually are, but you can say what the situation is that ism is a response to. So to understand the unified diversity, the unity and the diversity of behaviorisms, we need to look at the historical situation in which behaviorism emerged. And what were the people that we now call behaviorists, what were they responding to in their environment, to speak behavioristically about behaviorists? So I would say that most immediately this situation is the situation of the success of modern science, especially the physical sciences, the biological sciences. So the success of these sciences and of trying to make psychology scientific in this modern kind of sense. So science in this modern sense relies on having multiple investigators observing the same phenomenon. And a scientific experiment needs to be repeatable, for example, by other people. And for this to happen, everything needs to be open to scrutiny by other people. So the power of science really is that it's public, at least public within the community of scientists. It's based on what I like to call the show me principle, which is kind of an American expression. But don't just tell me, right? Don't just tell me about it. You've got to show me, or at least tell me how I can see it for myself. Whatever you want to assert to be true, whatever kind of assertion you make, it needs to be open in some way to verification or refutation by other people, maybe depending on what your theory of evidence is. But psychological phenomena are kind of a problem in this respect. Psychological phenomena have not been classically understood to be observable except by the person having them. So as John Locke wrote in the 17th century, other people's minds are invisible to us. And if other people's minds are invisible to us, if I can't observe your mind and you can't observe my mind, then how can they be objects of science, right? That goes against the model of modern science. So the problem can maybe be put more exactly in this way. So mental terms such as mind, consciousness, sensation, thought, perception, these kinds of things were understood by the time of modern science to refer to phenomena that were only observable by one person. So they were observable through something called introspection. This is an old idea, but the concept of introspection that we rely on today probably has, you could say it has roots in Descartes and was adopted in modern psychology. Locke has kind of a version of this, and it gets transmitted up until today, really, filtered through various other developments. But the idea of introspection is that you can kind of observe what's going on in your own mind. And the mental phenomena that were observed in introspection, and which seemed not to take up any space, were perhaps made out of, so people thought maybe these mental phenomena were made out of a different kind of substance than ordinary public objects like rocks and tables and chairs and organic animal bodies and stuff. So however, although these were maybe made of a special non-spatial substance, these mental phenomena still appeared to have some kind of causal role in the physical world. This was the confusing thing about the mind, is it seemed to be non-physical and yet it had some kind of physical effect. Maybe kind of, sort of, it's hard to say. So your mental desire to meet your friend for dinner, for example, caused your physical body to go to the restaurant at the right time. And this was maybe what you would call interactionism. So mind and body interact, although they're different kinds of things, but there was also a parallelist version of this, or maybe epiphenomenalist version of this, in which your mind desired to meet your friend and your body went to see your friend, but there was not a direct causal connection between the two. So anyway, this was one of the major ways that mind was thought of during the Enlightenment. It's kind of become common sense in a way. For I think in just like generally, I think that's how the kind of theory of mind that our language emphasizes, that there's kind of that mind is kind of a separate thing in its own world, and somehow it affects our bodies, but we don't really think too much about how that happens. So this was kind of one of the major ways anyways, that mind was thought about during the Enlightenment, and it was maintained in some of the major 19th century psychologies. But anyway, this way of thinking about mind and behavior and whether they're connected or not provided the basic problem, or the set of problems that was grappled with by what came to be called behaviorism. And the problem had 4 parts as far as I can tell. This is how I'm thinking about it so far, that there was these 4 parts of the problem. And maybe there were more, maybe there were, well, probably not less. I think there was at least these 4 parts of the problem. So the problem of mental substance was one of them, the problem of mental substance, and the problem of mental causation. I've already touched on both of those. Then the problem of introspection, which I've also briefly referred to, and the problem of mental language, so words about mind, words relating to mind. So you had these 4 things that were problems: mental substance, mental causation, mental language, and then the activity of introspection. So the problem of substance was a problem because it wasn't clear how, in principle, a mental substance could be scientifically observable. So we can observe according to the model of science, standard model of science, we can observe the physical world, but if mind is not physical, then how can we know about it? This was a problem. The problem of mental causation was a problem because it wasn't clear how a non-material substance could affect a material world. And if it didn't affect the material world, then what was its purpose? The problem of introspection was a problem because one person's introspection of their own mind could not be confirmed or disconfirmed by another person. Right? If I say I have a desire for this, if I say I have a belief about that, if I say I have a sensation of this, you kind of have to take me on my word, ultimately, right? If there's no, if the connection between mind and body is not clear, then you're kind of barred from making any definite conclusions based on my behavior or on the state of my body. So if mind is a separate thing, if mind is private, if mind is invisible to other people, then you have to kind of take my word on what I say about my own mind. There's no process of verification or refutation about that can be applied there. And then the problem of mental language was a problem because if we reject the traditional concept of mind, then what are mind words for? What are we doing when we use words like mind or consciousness or think or want or desire or believe? What do these words apply to then if there's no separate thing that is mind? So yeah, what are ordinary people doing when they talk about minds, and what should psychologists do with these words? If we've got these words, what are we supposed to do with them if we don't no longer believe in this traditional concept of mind? So this is what I might call Enlightenment psychology's bequest of incoherence, to borrow a phrase from Morris Peckham. This was their bequest of incoherence to psychologists of the 19th and 20th centuries. We had these ideas that didn't really seem to make sense when you put them in a scientific context. So behaviorism was a response to this incoherence of kind of pre-scientific psychology. And behaviorism would involve jettisoning, getting rid of or radically reconstructing the assumptions behind these four problems that I've mentioned, the four problems of mental substance, mental causation, introspection, and mental language. So when we talk about any particular behaviorist, I think, when we want to consider how they dealt with these four problems, or we want to consider how they dealt with these four problems. So when you're looking at a particular behaviorist, you can ask yourself, how do they deal with these four different problems, if they do? I think not every behaviorist deals with every problem. And there's kind of a difference between behaviorists who are more philosophical and some who are more experimental, and that affected how much they dealt with these four problems. And so some problems were more important to some behaviors than to others, and so on. But this gives you a basic way to look at different behaviorists and kind of judge their differences, their distinctions, the differences in their theories. But I'm not going to try to do this right now because that would be a lot of work. But for now, I just want to make a few observations about, generally about how these problems were dealt with. So let's take the problem of mental substance first. So pretty much everyone who has been called a behaviorist was a monist. So they believed in one kind of thing, and they were generally physicalists or materialists. This is not universally true. There's kind of an interesting pluralism among some behaviorists, but basically they rejected dualism. They rejected mind-body dualism is maybe the key thing. But generally they were drawn towards a kind of monism, materialism, or physicalism, however you want to talk about it. So they thought there was some fundamental non-mental kind of stuff in the universe, and everything else was made out of that. So the way I would maybe put it is that whatever the fundamental units of the universe turn out to be, maybe strings or whatever the smallest kind of thing is, if that's even the right way to think about it, these will not likely turn out to be conscious or have experience as we know it. So rather, I think for behaviorists in general, experience becomes possible only in certain kinds of physical systems. Only when matter, whatever that turns out to be, gets organized in a certain way, only when this happens can you speak of consciousness in like any sense that's really meaningful, or experience, or whatever term you might prefer to use. Okay, so that's the problem of mental substance. How about the problem of mental causation? So the classical question was, how does the mind relate to the world? This was an old question. So we've got the mind, we've got the world. They seem to be separate kinds of things. How do they relate to each other? In behaviorism, this was reconstructed as how does the organism adjust to the environment? So you don't really have mind and world anymore. That seems not the best way to think about it. You've got organism and you've got environment, or you've got kind of the organismic system and you've got the systems outside of that and surrounding that system, the larger systems of which that organism is a part, and so on. And the organism has to be in interaction or transaction, whichever you prefer, with those other systems. So questions about knowledge and belief and sensation and so on were reconceived on this basis. So the problem about whether non-material substances can interact with material substances, this problem disappears. And instead you have kind of a universe of physical things or physical systems interacting with and changing each other. So some of these acts and changes on the side of the organism can be called knowledge, or can be called sensation or perception or whatever. And the changes within but these changes within the organism are important parts of the organism's behavior. But they're not more important than the environment, which stimulates the organism both before and after it acts. So you've got these two things which are equally important, the organism and the environment, and they're in constant interaction with each other. The organism changes, and some of these changes we could call different things, like knowledge, whatever, thought, imagination, and so on. So that was mental causation. And then we have the third problem, the problem of introspection. So introspection, as traditionally practiced by philosophers and then by certain psychologists and groups of psychologists, like maybe the American structuralists and the German Würzburg school. Introspection of this kind, the behaviorist thought, had no place in a scientific psychology. So it either had to be jettisoned entirely, which was the position of John Watson, or it had to be reconstructed in such a way that as to make it properly public. And there was other kind of trends in German thought that also previous to this that tried to make introspection scientific. This is Wilhelm Wundt. And then people reacted against him, and it became kind of less scientific, maybe. And so behaviorists were either saying, let's get rid of it, or let's make it scientific. And this was more the position of, so Watson wanted to just get rid of it, and some other behaviorists, Grace de Laguna, wanted to keep it, or at least argued that there was a way to make it scientific. I won't get into all the details of that. But generally, it came to be understood that introspection, at least as traditionally practiced, did not yield reliable data. Introspection was, well, for example, introspection was something that was learned and which therefore relied on cultural categories. We're not born with some fundamental and infallible knowledge of our own inner states, however you want to conceive of these inner states. But actually, we learn from other people how to find out about our own inner states. And so it's more, our introspection is more a cultural matter rather than something that per se is scientifically valid. Maybe there's a way to make it scientifically valid, but it has to be done. It would have to be done in a careful way. Anyway, last problem of mental language, or mind words. Our fourth problem. There were two basic approaches to mind words. So I would maybe call these the ideal language approach and the ordinary language approach. And I'm taking these kind of from philosophy of language, where you have ideal language philosophers and ordinary language philosophers. But I think a similar kind of thing happened among behaviorists. And actually the philosophical version is related to the behavior version, but focusing on behaviorism. So in the ideal language approach, right? Ideal language. In this approach, mind words, mental language was translated into behavioral terms. It was translated into a way that made it observable. So for example, thought to take one example, was understood as subvocal speech behavior. That's something now that we can observe. So you're taking a word from common language and you're kind of idealizing or making it a more technical word in a scientific psychology or behavioristic psychology. But there were some cases where this could not really be consistently translated. Just maybe the word had too many meanings, or there was too many disagreements among behaviorists about how to use a word. So in some cases, it was best to just get rid of a word. And this was kind of Watson's famous one of the things Watson is famous for, because he didn't use mind or consciousness as technical terms. He thought we should not use words like that for that reason. They just had too many meanings. There was no accepted meaning. And it was just it wasn't worth trying to translate it into behavioral terms. Others took a different path. So Singer, E.A. Singer, who I've written a lot about, and B.F. Skinner, who I've also written a little bit about and talked about. They sometimes used consciousness in a technical sense to mean the observation or perception that you or someone else was having a perception or a thought, something like that. So that's a little bit related to like higher order theories of consciousness, kind of perceiving that someone is having a perception, or perceiving that you're having a perception, or reporting that you're having a perception or something could be what we mean by consciousness. This, of course, gets controversial just because the word consciousness has so many different meanings and people have kind of their own favorite meanings. But that was another path. But all behaviorists, it has to be said, including Watson, retained some traditional mind words, translated behaviorally, just because they need words and they can't invent totally new words for everything, or no one will understand what they're writing, right? You can't totally dispense with traditional language, or no one will be able to understand you. So they did have to retain some mind words, but generally these were translated in a behavior-oriented way, behavior-like way. So that the ideal language approach. Then you also have the ordinary language approach to mental words. And I should say first that this is not an either-or situation. You don't really need to choose ideal language or ordinary language. They're doing different things. So people often use both. Morse Peckham, you find using both approaches, and lots of other people as well. Anyway, in the ordinary language approach, you're looking at how mental words are used in daily life and what functions they have, right? What functions do they have in our lives? So these words were generally found to refer to behaviors or to likely behaviors. When you look at how people actually use words and why they use words, certain mind words when they do, it's because of behaviors that they're observing. So to say, for example, that someone has a great mind just means that they were able to do certain things with maybe unusual intelligence or unusual creativity. To say that someone is angry just means that they're likely to say or do certain things. You can see certain actions of theirs, facial expressions and so on. Maybe they're more likely to yell at you if you approach them and things like that. So it's about behaviors. To say that I believe, to take another mind word, to say that I believe that, say, the White House is in Washington, D.C., just means that if I want to see the White House, I will go to Washington, D.C., and if I say that I want to see the White House, it just means I'll probably try to see it, and will make plans to see it. And the ultimate reasons for this, for why I want this rather than something else, is going to be found by looking at my environmental history, maybe my genetics and stuff like that. So anyway, these were the 4 problems that behaviorists were trying to resolve through focusing on behavior. Right? Again, those were the problems of mental substance, the problem of mental causation, the problem of introspection, and the problem of mental language. Behaviorists resolved these problems in different ways, and this resulted in different kinds of behaviorism. So I think the problem of causation especially led to the more differences, maybe the most differences. So if mind did not cause behavior, this is like a common sense thing that we think and then we act. But if the mind did not cause behavior, then what did cause organisms to act in the way that they did? And the endeavor to give a detailed answer to this question of how behavior is caused led to sometimes strikingly different kinds of behaviorism. But I don't want to go into all of those details right now. I just wanted to explore what I think are the basic problems behaviorists were responding to. And that's really all I wanted to say for today. So thanks for listening, and have a good one.